Good afternoon. We'll now hear the presentation of Data on Tap, Inc. Please introduce yourself and your colleague, and you may begin.
And I'll just say as you start, welcome, and don't worry about the time of day or the fact that you're the last of the day. You will receive our apt attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Algis Aksnas. I'm a founder and CEO of Data on Tap, operating as .mobile. Here with me today is Alex Bauman, the co-founder of .mobile and a longtime colleague of mine. We founded the company in 2018 because we saw a market that was underserved and room for service innovation on top of existing radio access networks. We simply had to act. We are in support of the government policy directive and its focus on all forms of competition, innovation, investment, and affordability. We urge the Commission to meet these objectives in a manner that is immediate and nationwide for the benefit of all Canadians. A full MVNO framework will promote competition and innovation in their many forms, improve pricing differentiation and affordability across all regions of Canada, promote consumer interest in areas of accessibility, privacy, and can generate significant value back to our world-class networks. In other words, it's a win-win scenario for everyone: consumers, networks, and service innovators. Mr. Chairman, we're ready to launch a national wireless service within 6 months of CRTC decision that establishes 3 key things. First, mandates full MVNO access to mobile networks. Second, makes the current wholesale rates available to full MVNOs. Third, ensures that full MVNOs are able to operate with independence. We have covered this in detail in our interventions. Over a year ago, we shared our vision of a smart tiny telecom, providing access to great Canadian networks without adding much complexity or cost on top, and started building it. 6 months ago, on August 29th, we were officially registered as a proposed full MVNO with the CRTC. Today I speak on behalf of the .mobile team, there are just 6 of us for now, as well as over 7,000 of our members who support our vision. This is my 3rd time appearing in front of the Commission. It was a privilege to be here in 2013 and 2017 during the Wireless Code of Conduct proceedings. At the time, I was head of product, customer acquisition, and later leading commercial strategy for a Canadian regional provider. We believe in positive change through regulatory process. The regulatory decisions over the last decade did a lot to improve the industry, and although disagreeing initially, it seems that many industry players now agree that they achieved positive outcomes. The sky didn't fall. The situation is no different this time around, especially if we look at the bigger perspective. Now I would like to address some of the key arguments we've heard from this wireless industry review. The Competition Bureau identified that the market power of the incumbent carriers results in an uncompetitive market dominated by players with signs of coordinated behavior. We agree. However, as detailed in our answers to the Competition Bureau report and its underlying studies, we disagree on which specific market segments are seeing these early signs of competition. Examples explored in the report were isolated, heavily focused on hardware subsidy, and prices for the reference promotional plans have already increased twice. In our view, the only market that is somewhat competitive is a $0 devices on a contract. The recommendation to give the regionals more time is misguided. There is no guarantee that they will expand into regions currently without a 4th player or create net new coverage. Videotron, in our view, is a great example of service innovation and differentiation, but appear uninterested in operating as an MVNO outside of Quebec. Even 10 years from now, it's unlikely that all Canadians will have a 4th provider to choose from, continuing to see more inferior products without consequence, as Bell's Mark Graham had put it eloquently. Based on evidence provided by interveners like Manitoba Coalition, ACT, and PIAC, there are a meaningful number of Canadians who are underserved and disproportionately affected by industry's pricing practices. We agree. We disagree with industry assertions that providing service to these Canadians, either directly or through a wholesaler, is uneconomical and will risk future investments on the eve of 5G. Consider the very recent purchase of XploreNet for $2 billion as indication that infrastructure is a great investment. Besides, the 5G race will not be won by being fastest to market, but by making efficient investments at the right time and driving adoption and use of wireless services. We agree with Alec, Bruce, and Bob's statements that pure play wireless competition is needed to properly ignite service innovation and pricing differentiation. Some interveners would like you to believe that they are the only solution to the problem. Let me be clear, we are not the only solution. We're one of many companies that will thrive in the new world of service innovation, hyper-focused on solutions and purposely built in the new digital economy. Our goal as a pure-play full MVNO is to improve basic connectivity, its accessibility, and making it more universal and affordable, which is different from being cheaper. We want to do this for all Canadians anywhere in Canada, irrespective of age, income level, or when they arrived in Canada. If this proceeding is about evidence, at what point is there enough evidence to state that the wireless affordability problem exists? Do we believe British Columbia interveners survey results that only 6% of us believe the cost of their cell phone service is reasonable? We just dropped to the bottom quintile in the developed world for mobile data usage, according to the latest OECD report. Do we agree that 2.5 gigabytes of average data usage on world-class networks is a problem? Do we believe that big telecom lawyers and highly paid executives telling us that LTE advanced networks, new shiny highways, are at capacity? That there is no room for additional usage? That nothing can be done and the best way is more of the same? Being on the eve of 5G, we're at the best point in time to discuss how Canadians want their network infrastructure and service to be built efficiently, with purpose, and having everyone's needs in mind, including so-called marginally economical customers. Do we have time to discuss it endlessly, or does it need an immediate and urgent intervention? At what point do we call them out that reserving the most of that infrastructure for the fast access of just a few is unfair, un-Canadian, and short-lived in a new stakeholder economy? I'll hand it over to Alex.
Thank you. Improving the affordability of wireless services in Canada will not be achieved by a simple reduction to the average price. We have too many small problems masquerading as one big problem. We can try to describe them using national studies and international comparisons, but inevitably we will arrive at averages and blanket statements that miss the mark. Just this week, several interveners have recommended that the Commission mandate specific rate plans aimed to solve the needs of the Canadians they represent. You'll notice they did not all arrive at the same price or inclusions. The truth is, competition in the form of pure play, full MVNOs is the best positioned to uncover and solve these problems. Who today is focused on solving problems where wireless usage is moderate, variable, temporary, seasonal, or transient? TELUS might tell you it's their public mobile brand, yet they offer an artificial reduction to the quality and availability of service, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. This is service differentiation in its punitive form. New Canadians and youth are required to pay a deposit or accept subpar service. Canadians who have seasonal needs find that most brands are unable to provide them with relevant service. Tourists and other visitors to the country must accept non-competitive rates or unacceptable levels of service in order to get connected. We should be ashamed that this is one of their first experiences in Canada after landing. We have spent considerable time and effort in designing a pure wireless product to solve some of the problems I have just described. Over a year ago, we published a concept on our website and invited Canadians to provide feedback, and as of this morning, we have over 7,000 members. For our proposal to be viable, we need to operate our own core network as a full MVNO. We already have an agreement with a core network provider to power our low-cost, high-tech vision. Among its many forward-thinking features are native implementations of the latest network services like VoLTE and Wi-Fi calling, advanced AI tools and if this then that integrations, plus direct interconnects to multiple RANs, including 5G compatibility. It's exciting to imagine how new tech stacks in the API economy will deliver new pricing models. Even more so when you realize that pure-play, full MVNOs will be free of legacy constraints like bundling services or multiple brands. Our proposal, for example, includes a recurring monthly fee of basic service for voice and text, while data is purchased on top on a pay-per-gigabyte basis with unlimited rollover. It is intended to self-optimize for users with inconsistent, low, or temporary needs without penalty. Beyond pricing, we aim to lower barriers to entry, support the life cycle of older hardware, and simplify roaming by not charging for it. As a digital-only provider, this service can be available for all Canadians on day one with SIM card shipping directly to any mailing address or immediately over the air using eSIM. We often describe our business model as an IMVNO or infrastructure MVNO because a core network is an infrastructure investment. Even more so than infrastructure, investment needs to be made in research and development. Canadians should be leaders, building better experiences with technology, improving service for specific or niche users. The Canadian MNOs are good network companies, but they are not good tech companies. They are not driving innovation in technology or service delivery, and they are not embracing infrastructure as a service. FinTech is enabling innovators to address the underbanked. We need to do the same for telco tech. Let's elevate Canada onto the global stage again. Change needs to be effected where it is needed the most, and pure-play, wireless competition in the form of full MVNOs will deliver where infrastructure-based competition has failed by creating differentiated pricing and service innovations for all Canadians. So now we must decide where the future of wireless connectivity in Canada looks like, despite the short-term disagreements of all of the interveners. Do we maximize shareholder value, or do we improve service to more Canadians with a potentially lower than usual profit margin? Maximizing the profits of shareholders alone can lead to inequality and is clearly not a good long-term strategy. It breaches the trust of your customers, something that is very hard to win back. Marc Benioff recently said, "When we serve all stakeholders, business is the greatest platform for change." And the great news is that stakeholder capitalism is finally hitting a tipping point. It will take some time for the incumbent carriers to get the memo, so it'll be up to you, Mr. Chairman, and this panel of commissioners to lead the way. In the long run, all of our objectives align. I'll hand it back over to Algus now.
To summarize, to be able to achieve policy objectives and start fully utilizing the potential of great Canadian network infrastructure to the benefit of all Canadians, we're asking the Commission to do the following without delay. 1. Mandate full MVNO access to mobile networks. 2. Make the current wholesale rates available to full MVNOs. 3. Ensure that full MVNOs are able to operate with independence, including things like numbering and number portability. Lastly, I would also like to address one specific point that Mr. Darren Entwistle from TELUS brought up in his testimony to the Commission. He said that mental health issues and claims within the telecommunications industry, according to Morneau-Chappelle data, is 2 to 3 times higher than the other industries in Canada. The comment was made in passing, but shouldn't be just discarded. We're urging Commission to provide an urgent resolution on this, calling the wireless industry to assess underlying issues with this problem and start addressing that immediately. Whether it's in frontline employees, in stores or call center agents, something should be done to address the root causes. We all have a shared responsibility in this. Knowing about it, delaying any possible solutions is simply not acceptable. Let's make this year a wireless leap year for Canada. We welcome your questions now.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I forgot it was a leap year. Let me start. Actually, I want to pick up on a couple of things in your opening remarks. Of your three very clear requests, I wouldn't mind if you would elaborate a little on the third. The first two are very obvious to me, but the third, ensuring that full MVNOs are able to operate with independence. Could you add to that for me? Add a little color?
Thank you for your question. I think first thing is about being able to operate our own core. That means on the top of existing radio access networks. That provides a level of independence in terms of pricing, marketing, service innovation, security, our approach to privacy, and other many things. We list out, I believe, that in one of the interventions where we describe what the full MVNO description in our view is. And just to add on top of this, things like numbering and numbering portability, it's very important for us to own and operate our own numbering ranges. I'll give you an example. Since we're one of the first proposed full MVNOs, to our knowledge, to explore the sort of above-the-line path of applying with CRTC and starting negotiations with MNOs. We've been charting the waters and seeing where we hit the obstacles. So just like Northwestern Passage. And one of those is an application with a North American numbering administrator, NECA. There are only two definitions that NECA accepts at the moment. One of them being a wireless provider, and the other one being reseller. There is nothing that defines the full MVNO operating business model and independent business model. So as a part of this proceeding, we're arguing that these details have to be defined, as well as access itself and the rates. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you. You also picked up a reference to presentation we heard the other day, and you said we agree with Alex, Bruce, and Bob's statement that pure play wireless competition is needed to properly ignite service innovation and pricing differentiation. Now, my recollection is they also said there should only be one. Would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I can take this one. The concept of a pure play competitor helps to differentiate from competitors who have multiple lines of business that they're selling to the same household, to the same consumer, where they have to manage the revenue from each of those streams and the interplay between all of them. Whereas a pure play competitor would have the opportunity to compete purely on wireless, innovate in ways that they might tap into some of those other lines of business without necessarily eating their own lunch. We do make a fairly clear statement in our presentation today that we are not the only solution, and we don't think there should just be one player. We believe that for problems that Canadians are facing today to be solved, smaller groups have to go in and find and solve those problems. Most of the challenges we see today are kind of existing paradigms being like scaled down or scaled up to solve somebody else's problem, whereas it actually needs something entirely new to properly resolve the issue.
Can I just add to this? I think the presentation from that group also mentioned, $100 million investment. I also believe it's a way of creating another barrier of entry, so enter and then close the door for everyone else. That's certainly not our approach. But I do believe that full MVNOs can evolve into MVNEs, and we certainly explored that in our discussions with Canadian MNOs. I do believe that will be 3 or 4 MVNO enablers or aggregators, and it does make sense for Canadian MNOs to, if it will be 10, 15 MVNOs applying for the access, to aggregate them in a certain way and deploy them and implement them efficiently through through some sort of a gate or some sort of aggregator or enabler.
Thank you. Well, you've touched on a couple of things that I'd like to branch into. In a minute, we'll talk maybe about some of those plans and customer needs. What is it that's, I guess you've given us part of the answer in your remarks, but what makes your proposal different? What's the, what's the secret sauce in your approach? And how dependent is it on changes that are not, all present in the marketplace, use of eSIMs, and so on?
Well, for one, we're hyper-focused on very specific issues of the lower end of the market. So while everyone's looking at the top end of the market and how to, subsidize the phones and upsell every 24 months with the newest phone, we're looking at the end of the market how to protect the phone, how to repair it. Is there a way to make sure that kids passing down their phones to their parents and selling it within the network, so making it an efficient ecosystem for low end users. So that's the business model and the vision. But overall, we think that our approach is also friendly for network investments and is a win-win-win scenario, as I said, for network investments, especially if we start at the current wholesale rates. Current wholesale rates are available to anyone from Bell, Rogers, and TELUS, from dominant players, and they've been available, from going back to 2015. We believe that the focus on the higher end of the market has made a lot of regional players, some of them, and most of the market focus on the higher end of the market, and something's missing at the low end of the market. So the secret sauce obviously is in differentiation. It's in the low-cost business operating model that digital operating model provides, and the better experience and other things. Alex?
I'll add a couple of things to what Alga said. The first is that we looked at whether something could be done with the existing the wholesale rates for roaming. We do think that they are a little bit high and they don't reflect the current economics of 4G and LTE. However, something can still be done with them and problems can still be solved if access was made available to full MVNOs as we're proposing. The other piece on the secret sauce, though, is really this new approach to building a tech stack of leveraging the API economy and building out using the latest and greatest, essentially. And this includes leveraging public cloud and cloud-based services and other SaaS-based services, in addition to custom builds that kind of pull pieces together or create a unique user experience on top. We think that building for the future of eSIM makes sense for who we believe would benefit from the product we've conceived. It is not critical to the business model. A SIM card is probably the easiest thing you could ship to anybody. I mean, it's almost like regular letter post at that point. So we think that that's probably the best route to go. It doesn't require points of distribution, and it can go directly to any consumer, regardless of what their distance would be to kind of the local city center or community where they might actually find a retailer.
So we'll come back to the target market in a sec. Oh, did you have something you wanted to add?
I think we haven't seen the eSIM in the full potential as well. I kind of want to say that because you asked this question of some bigger telecoms here. They mail eSIMs and they ask customers to come into the store to activate them. Kind of, I don't know, counterintuitive. And just considering that this fall, when the iPhone 12 launches.
I think.
Yeah. It will be the fourth generation of iPhones that support eSIM. Just looking at the technology adoption with our experience through, how AWS Free got adopted through phones, etc. We're estimating that 2/3 of phones will be able to, in 2021, will be able to subscribe to through eSIM, so over the air, that not needing to go anywhere to retail, including northern regions, including rural areas, etc., etc. That improves accessibility a lot, and the digital model in that case, lowering the barriers. It's not needing credit check, etc., improves the accessibility by a lot.
Thank you. So before we talk, as I was saying, I'll get into the sort of low-cost plans or the target market in a second, but you've indicated you've registered and you have engaged discussions with the MNOs. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your experience with the MNOs.
I'll be glad to answer the questions. Just a note that we do have NDAs with 2 out of 3 MNOs, so some of it I might not be able to describe. But also in the spirit of the third one, we just obviously wouldn't disclose too much of a confidential information, but happy to talk about it.
So 2 of 3 are at least prepared to talk to you?
Because our business concept of Data on Tap, company name suggested that our vision is to give Canadians access to world-class networks without adding complexity or any additional cost on top of it. Kind of suggest a very simple model, and we knew it right from the start. We knew that this kind of pricing structure could be helpful for moderate customers, actually underserved parts of the market. So we started negotiations right away last May of 2019 with very direct proposals to all 3 national carriers.
Would it be a fair characterization, well, actually, before I go there, with the 3 nationals, have you approached any of the regional players?
No, the priority was on national, and I think one of the reasons is that, the talk usage is dropping considerably. It used to be 500 average minutes of use and 500 text messages per month per average Canadian, at least a few years ago. I can't remember in the newest CMR. Some things that are becoming more and more important for, let's say, when you just make 1 call a day, you want it to be reliable. If it's about kids' lines or children, that call is very, very important. So it could be 1 minute, but it's important to have it on a reliable network. While regionals are concentrating on a lot of data within a small area, maybe people that are less mobile, etc. Our specific calling in this case is around national networks. National networks would fit this specific customer base very well if they would have a better business model to address them, and we're that business model, a digital business model.
I'll just add that the regional providers just inherently are regional, so there are many Canadians that wouldn't be able to take advantage of what we're proposing. We're not entirely confident that the next person to propose a new way of doing business will tackle the same challenges that we are. They may look to solve different problems, and we would hate to leave Canadians behind in what we're trying to accomplish.
In your May submissions, you described, in effect, the market as being insufficiently competitive. Sorry, I'm just going to paraphrase. Lacking in product differentiation, a focus on top-tier plans, and suggested that again, paraphrasing that they were punitive to the sort of lower tier component of the market. Why would they ignore, I guess two-part question, well, why do you think the carriers collectively would ignore that part of the market? And two, if you are onto something with your secret sauce, do you have any optimism that you'd be able to reach a negotiated outcome with them if this is an area in which they're truly not interested, not serving? Doesn't that suggest you might be able to reach a negotiated outcome?
I'll start, and I'm sure Alex will jump in. But I think because of the 90+% of the market being concentrated under 3 big brands, they're not competing against each other. They're carefully designed to upsell into the top and premium brand with, as we say, punitive overages that increased significantly as recently as a year ago, I think, by 40%. First byte cost $10 in the overage. So they're designed to upsell to the premium brand. So and that's kind of the part of the discussion and part of what we think Competition Bureau missed in this is that yes, there is a bit of a competition happening, and but not in each segment, and you can think about the geographical things, but I think this is more about, as everyone on this panel said, it's about margins. It's about profit margins and about the shareholder value that is, I would argue, is in conflict with a policy objective to serve all with a better connectivity. Now, the second part of question is why would they ignore? Well, I kind of answered that in the first. Why would they ignore? Because they're, all designed to carefully upsell to top brands and premium brands. Do we have a good shot of agreeing commercially? Well, if you look at it, if we started in May and had enough time to interact, meet face to face, and answer questions and provide additional information of how we see the technical integrations, how we see the target markets, etc., etc. I think Big Three sees the opportunity in the business model. They do it themselves in a way with public mobile, TELUS, and you see Fizz and Videotron's example. These things are coming, but they're not going the full way. They're not fully differentiated. You don't see tools that are needed for a low end of the market, like rollover data. Seniors travel a lot to the States, and we don't see Canada-US plans that are tailored for like 2 gigabytes of usage or something like that. Snowbirds, etc. So because it's better to upsell them to these premium brands, and while there is incentive to serve customers better, the incentive not to serve and to upsell is higher at the moment. So that's why we think the regulatory intervention is absolutely needed to indicate that long-term vision that we think that aligns with everyone's goals.
It's a great segue. Oh, go ahead.
I'll be very brief in what I'm adding. We obviously entered the negotiations with a lot of optimism. We are not finished in negotiation at this point, and there is still some optimism. But there is also the kind of cloud of history hanging over us where this has never worked for anybody before.
Thank you. It's a good segue into a question I have about some of those market segments. But just before we leave the sort of bigger picture of the competitive market, I'll take it from your preceding responses that you don't think that the recent development of so-called unlimited plans and make a significant difference in the competitive market?
It does. I think we commended it. I commended it publicly. Rogers, I launched unlimited plans in 2009 myself on my laptop at Wind Mobile. I think it's a good development, but I think they waited, and on the record said that they waited for what, I don't know, but they waited, I think, for this to be economically good for them when cost of maybe addressing that billing or overcharge is higher than including the overage in the plans. They also use that opportunity to raise the price for BYOD specifically and for unlimited. And 20% of Canadians now can enjoy good service. Our question is, what about other 80?
Fair enough. So into the sort of low-cost plan scope, can you elaborate a little? You just started to talk about seniors who might spend a lot of time in the southern U.S. Other, I assume, potential categories would be students or new Canadians, young families. Obviously, you think these are segments that are not well served or taken care of by the existing players. Can you give me an indication of what you think's lacking there and how you'd fill it?
I think inherently these segments, obviously they have all these different they have all these different qualities and behaviors. It's hard to put them in one specific bucket, but there is a lot in common, which is changing needs. So 1 month you might have 4 gigabyte or 5 gigabyte need, and the next month you might have 1 gigabyte need, and that's definitely not served very well with current prepaid offerings and sub brands, flanker brands. There's obviously in flanker brands you see things like 3 megabit per second speed throttling, different from 3G speeds, I would say, and I think it's an issue. You see other, I think, other aspects of the service that doesn't serve this specific segment very well, and we have all of these incorporated into our vision. Alex, do you want to add something on this?
I'd say that although we like to put a face to some of these challenges, and some of them are faced by seniors or youth or students or tourists, it's really more the situation they find themselves in that we're trying to address, because we think that's, I think, more problem solving than trying to pick a target market that you're going to then assign advertising dollars to. So for us, the challenge is when somebody has needs that are temporary, how do you let them turn something on and off every 2 or 3 months? If somebody has needs that are highly variable, as Algus mentioned, high data usage 1 month, down to very low usage for a few months, and then maybe medium usage in another country for a period of time. How do you best optimize for those users so that they don't have to sandbag and select a plan that for 80% of the time is 2 to 3 to 4 times as much as they actually need? And then on top of that, when they do pick, say, lower options, how do you maintain things like cost certainty for people that are sensitive to it? And those are the types of challenges we're looking to solve, and I think we've laid out our proposal fairly clearly on how we would do that.
Thanks. Now, under your model, I'm assuming it would be predominantly web-driven. You're not going to have retail points of presence. Sounds like a relatively, if you will, high-tech solution. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, that's a fair characterization.
So if you were listening earlier today when the group representing, I resent the fact they were talking about people over 60 being old age, but we'll leave that aside. I won't hold it against them. They were pointing out some of the challenges, though, for seniors who are less technically savvy and so on, particularly older seniors. So I just would like you to comment on that. And low-income households, language challenges. A lot of these things are not easily resolved if you don't have good broadband access, if you're not very computer literate. So I appreciate those are some of the market segments that you propose to target, but how do you get to them and how do you meet all their needs?
I think that's a fair question, and just to reiterate it to make sure I understand, we are proposing a essentially fully digital model for how we would reach these consumers and how Canadians would actually interact with us or subscribe to the service. And so in some of the segments we've described, not all of them have the same level of tech literacy. And I think that's true across the board, and I don't think we would be able to serve all of those users. And as we've said, we can't solve the problem for everybody. It's one of the challenges we see with the large carriers is they are trying to serve everybody, and so there are large segments that they don't serve very well. We made a very conscious decision to pick a solution that we knew would solve the problems very well for very specific users, and had to give up on some of the other ones, assuming that with the right regime, others will be able to help where we cannot. On the topic of just specifically, say, whether it's seniors or youth or somebody who is not necessarily familiar with the Canadian landscape, generally today they rely on others to help them navigate these waters. And we anticipate that that same type of support will actually be easier if you're supporting somebody in the digital realm, because you will be less of an interpreter and more of a direct support. Instead of having to enter the conversation when that other individual is already now speaking with a representative or on the phone or into a store, they can do it one-on-one directly and in person with the person who needs assistance.
Thank you.
I would add as well that the adoption of digital services, Netflix and Uber, et cetera, is increasing, and that we shouldn't underestimate some of these groups, and they do expect these similar experiences from their wireless service provider, and sometimes it's easier to do it in digital world than than have I don't know how many languages in the world in the call center. So just to say that we are thinking about these things, and we're thinking obviously simplification of rate plans, simplification of relationship with wireless service provider is a huge part of it. If we're able to deliver for a small amount of Canadians this better experience, that's what we want to do, and that's our ambition.
Thanks. Your proposed approach, I guess, would compete fundamentally, or compare, maybe I shouldn't say compete, compare or target some of the same market segments as the flanker brands of the companies. But we've heard a lot about, if we approve full MVNOs, that the real dramatic impact will be on the regional facilities-based providers. And I just wonder if you'd have any comment on the stated or argued negative impacts of allowing a full MVNO.
Yeah, we are familiar with the space. Obviously, worked at the regional provider 9 years, both of us. I do believe it's true, because they're currently more in that value-conscious side of things, and when we check our member base, there is more of those, yes. But there are 13 billion and upwards market capitalization companies with a couple of private jets, etc. They can stand on their own, and there is nothing that they cannot do that these two guys or six of us in the team cannot do. There is a plenty of government support, we think, that we received throughout the years for set-asides, through accelerated depreciation, for other things that allow them to allow their business to flourish. And if they do want to focus on seniors, just as we will, bring it on.
Okay, thanks. So if we were to mandate MVNO access, should it be to all three national carriers? And and I guess just to finish the question, what would it do to your proposed approach if only one or two were required to do so? if anything?
It would simply make less Canadians we would not be able to solve the problem for more Canadians. So nationwide ability to operate nationwide across all of the geographies, as I said, starting with the wholesale rates that are already available to any provider, is where we would start. Obviously, we're thinking, or we think that the rates that are currently available are, obviously higher than in other countries. You can get, I think, $13 to $14 a gigabyte right now. You can get about $5 a gigabyte in US. Like even us two can walk in and buy at the $5 a gigabyte range. Alex, do you?
I think rather than focusing, so we believe that we would operate best on a national network as a full MVNO, given what we're trying to accomplish. I actually don't think you should limit it to only the national networks if there were some kind of a mandate.
That's my next question. So.
Yeah, I would actually expand it to all, and that's because we're trying to enable innovation and new types of business models. And we've heard from some interesting interveners, including CN, for example, who is looking for an opportunity to both build and share networks in order to create like a better and more secure platform for what they're doing. So I think it would go broader than just the national networks for it to work.
So you would advocate it for all the regional players? Does that include SaskTel, T-Baytel?
Yes, and not specifically for our own needs, but for the needs of the market and for this to work.
Understood.
I think they would benefit. I'm sorry. I think they would benefit from it as well. I think it's just initial position and short-term thinking. I think regionals have to benefit from selling excess capacity that they're building, etc. Plus, multi-network access was argued by Halton Regional Peel Police. I think for security and other reasons. We have experience talking to carriers in the U.S. that use multiple RAN on the back end, such as Google Fi. A few years back, I think we heard the numbers of their customer satisfaction that were in the mid-90s. So 90% of people were happy and satisfied with that kind of service, which is very similarly had the similar pricing principles initially. So we charged per gigabyte and offered cost control features, and we're not charging for any roaming anywhere in the world, for that matter. When you have one of the highest prices in the world in Canada, it's a passport.
The balance of trade isn't too bad?
Yeah, it's a passport. You can take it anywhere, and be able to use freely. Like, what is this, additional charge when you go to roaming? It's it's another uncompetitive area.
I was going to ask you a couple of questions about, what if different ways the commission might slice or dice this. Provinces, some provinces, not in others, using CMAs. But I think the answer that you've given me already is very clear, that that's your model, not presupposes, your model, and in your view, the interests of Canadians would be best served if it was broad and a universal obligation. Is that a fair summary, just so I don't go through questions you don't need to answer?
Yeah, thank you. It's also immediate, yes. So while on one hand you have a real challenge, we acknowledge that, to protect the investment into networks, etc. But on the other hand, like, how much time do we need to wait for something to happen there? And you have a solution that potentially could address things from the bottom right away.
Thank you. A couple of last questions for me. Well, one question, one sort of invitation for you to describe a little more how you'd roll out. Question is, what about 5G? Is that an access immediately? Well, one, do you think the existing tariffs require it, and two, do you need it?
I'd say initially we don't really care about it. I don't think it matters for anyone. At the moment, if you look closely at the announcements of 5G and when you ask around in these panels, they talk about the slow rollout, adoption curves, etc. I think if you're talking about affordability of services, the 5G will matter, in 3 to 5 years for these segments at the soonest. And if you take into consideration the average usage of 2.5 gigabytes in Canada, on the 5G it will take I don't know how many seconds to to reach that. So it's not really about 5G, and really consumers do not urge for speed or anything like that. We do see a big utility for 5G. Obviously, we do agree that 5G brings economical benefits. Maybe they're overestimated, and we laugh a bit about the 5G race, and you don't always win the race by arriving there fastest with 10% adoption. What we want is more people to start using services now, and that is actually more sensible path to 5G.
Thanks. The last question I was going to ask you, well, as I said, not really a question. Just give me a sense of if we were to mandate wholesale MVNO access, how you would roll out your service. Can you just give me a bit of a picture about what's, sort of steps 1 through 5, and how you've said, I think, 6 months? Was that, if I remember correctly from your opening remarks? That struck me as remarkably quick and ambitious. I would appreciate a sense of, we say yes, what do you do next?
So just today we announced our cloud core partnership with a Scandinavia-based company called Working Group 2. We started building our I'd say framework for our service already since last February. We do have customer onboarding, so let's say our onboarding in the future won't change that much. If you join .mobile today on the website, it takes probably less than a minute to do that. You join with an email, and later on you would add your payment card or debit card to as a payment method, and off you go. So these components are already being built and being addressed, as well as our ecosystem of marketplace being able to take care of phone better, repair, trade in, recycle, sell to other members, buy cases, accessories, etc., to protect the phone, insure, etc. So all of these parts of the ecosystem we're building already. And we will be self-sufficient serving these needs already at some point in time. So wireless will be something that will add to this thing. So while we have this certain velocity of things that we're building on the side, and core is a part of it, and onboarding is a part of it, other services are a part of it, but mobile virtual network operator is virtual. We don't need to spend a lot of time constructing network towers, and someone else does it very well, and we appreciate that work. We think that they're doing a great job constructing the networks, and we just want to utilize them. So our work, our cloud core, let's say, setup will take 3 to 4 months after a certain period of exploration with a MNO partner. We're using a fairly standard integration with MNOs or principals that follow sort of a roaming architecture and roaming interfaces. We can do that fairly easily and fast. I don't know what else to add. SIM card development, eSIM comes as a one package. numbering and managing numbering, joining the number portability. We've done it once before, so it's a take two for us, but
Fair enough.
I don't know if Alex wants to add here.
I can echo that we've done a lot of groundwork already, and most of that groundwork is in building how users will be able to interact with our services. And so it's, onboarding, payment, shipping and delivery, profile management. And the way we've architected it is that there's essentially a middle layer that kind of pulls everything together, which allows us to work in parallel across many things at once when we have a reason to reach that kind of velocity. So all of the things Algus mentioned around SIM card, around integration of the core network, and all the other pieces, within 6 months, all could be accomplished. There is some dependency on the MNO, willing to start.
Sure.
Yeah.
Last question for me is this being done anywhere else? And I'm assuming in some respects your model is portable. It's good that you're doing it or propose to do it in Canada, and we're concerned about Canada, but I assume you could take this anywhere, and is it being done anywhere else? Something similar?
I think in a way Canada is unique because of the market situation. We think it's a very thriving wireless market. We want and we're vested in Canada, and it's our home. We want to help Canadians to
I wasn't
solve this
trying to
problem.
direct you anywhere else.
No.
I was just trying to get a sense
No,
of...
but we do get interest from other countries. We just believe that there is less need there. There is more competition in those different jurisdictions, etc. So, but we do have international ambitions, both operating, licensing the model, and selling the technology, because we're building it in a modular way. So we do believe that we could have international success as well.
Thank you. Those are all my questions, but my colleagues may have some. Commissioner Barron?
Yes, thank you. Maybe to pick up on your last point, we have heard from many experts that have explained how the MVNO market around the world is fraught with many failures and very few successes. Some have explained that part of it may be due to the conflicting incentives of the carriers and the MVNOs who are cannibalizing each other's customers. So how do you feel about your potential experience in Canada, and what makes you believe that it would be more successful than what these experts appear to be saying?
It's about the viability of the business model. So in our case, we will be differentiated in the way that we will, at the ground floor, will service certain services to all Canadian subscribers, to 34 million. That allows us to target Bell subscribers for repair, for trade-in, and Rogers for accessory sales, TELUS for trade-in or whatever other things like that. So we believe that this business model is just emerging. We mentioned in our presentation that we want Canada to lead the way. We see a lot of interest from MVNOs around the world, what we're doing. We're going to a conference in end of April to Berlin, to MVNO World. We spoke to someone from MVNO World today in the morning. They're very interested to see what's happening in Canada as well. But just going back to your question about failures and successes, I think it's an inevitable thing in the market that some MVNOs will fail, and some of them will succeed. It's a natural way.
I think when you look at MVNOs, they have a much lower barrier to entry than being a full MNO. So the frequency of failure when you have more players, it'll appear higher because there will just be a greater number of them. But even in Canada, when we opened up the market to new entrants to build their own MNO networks, we saw failures. So I wouldn't say that any entry to a market as complex as wireless, where you have a lot of revenue at risk, that there won't be competition and there won't be people who are unable to cut it. So we're confident in our business plan and what we'd like to achieve, but I can't say that there won't be failures if it's opened up to MVNOs.
Thank you.
Commissioner Levy?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. A number of interveners have said that are supportive of the full MVNO model have said that the real advantages have less to do with lowering prices and more to do with opening up innovation. You have an innovative model. What other kinds of innovation can you see occurring in an MVNO world?
A lot. Let me start from something that is close to us at heart, is a respect for privacy. It's a big thing now in the consumer's mind, and I think MVNOs can bring a differentiated proposition when it comes to privacy. When you're joining one of the big telcos at the moment in Canada, you're surrendering a lot of private information. You have to pass the credit check, etc., etc. In our view, the privacy and our approach to privacy is sort of, you start with an email and later on you kind of grow from there. We also allow things like, ability to leave. We'll actually have a leave button in our application, and then we'll allow things like deletion of data and then potentially portability of data later on. So that's about the privacy. But, I mentioned the other differentiators, such as ability to use the service in roaming without additional roaming fees. You see the perpetual rollover of data that allows you to take what you bought, what you purchased to the next month, and so on. You would see cost controls. You would see certain services that can be done by developers and better access to our platforms by other innovators. A lot more Wi-Fi calling, ability to use it around the world when you're on Wi-Fi, and other different differentiators that are, we see around 1,300 MVNOs in the world, I think, at the moment, and some of them, especially the newer kind, that are relying on and building their services based on a new digital economy. They find ways for innovative services that, let's say, for kids, we see a Swedish MVNO called Vimla that is allowing one number to reach parents when the school calls, and something that can be done in a month's time now. That service innovation is unavailable in Canadian market because everyone's concentrating on kind of creating bigger barriers and overlapping the networks, and just it's not the way of the future.
There are those who say that full MVNOs will do nothing to spread better service to rural and remote areas, and that the chances are that any MVNOs will simply cherry pick those markets that have the densest group of potential customers. What do you say to that?
I think this relates to this question and your previous one. We've heard from different groups who have talked about the desire for a local community or something more related to these remote areas, that they would like to create services designed to serve their own needs. So the barrier to entry still exists for being an MVNO, but that's not to say that it requires somebody who is operating out of a city to start an MVNO and then branch out to try to find people in rural areas who need their services. I would imagine that where those needs are, MVNOs would pop up to serve them.
I'll also add, we talked about eSIM and et cetera, like that's also coming. So we will not discriminate. There's no reason for us to not to serve anyone that would want to use our service. We don't need the retail presence there. We can ship it through Amazon Prime or Canada Post or deliver it through Uber driver that has 10 of our SIM cards in the glove box. We'll do all of that.
And my final question, what happens if we do not mandate full MVNO? What happens to your business?
I think we'll survive through our e-commerce and other differentiated business models, but I think Canada loses the opportunity to solve this problem immediately and for all of the nation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all of our questions. Thank you for taking the time to appear in front of us, finding your way through the snow. There's probably some more out there now. That is it for today. We resume at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Madam Secretary.
9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.